He was a titan in the corporate world, a man who dominated boardrooms and built empires with the same ruthless precision he used to craft every detail of his existence. She was his wife, the beautiful, gentle soul who believed his love was her greatest fortune. But when she offered him the one thing that money could never buy, a child and an heir, his reaction wasn't happiness, but a cold, quiet order. Get rid of it. He gave her a choice: keep the baby or keep the life of unimaginable privilege. He never expected she would choose a third option: vanish. Now, 5 years later, a new, enigmatic CEO has risen to lead his fiercest competitor, a woman whose ruthless brilliance and cutting strategies have left the business world guessing her origins. But he knows those eyes. The same eyes that once adored him now blaze with the ice-cold fire of revenge. He is about to find out that the woman he tried to crush has returned to destroy him. The world knew Vincent Drake as the uncontested king of the urban jungle. His corporation, Drake Industries, was a colossal force, its influence woven into every aspect of modern life, from the skyscrapers that pierced the clouds to the cutting-edge devices people carried in their pockets. He was a man carved from ambition and tempered by the relentless furnace of cutthroat competition. His face, a mask of sculpted, icy perfection, appeared on the covers of finance magazines, his name spoken in equal measures of awe and fear. He wasn't merely wealthy, he made other men rich or ruined them without hesitation. A modern Midas, everything he touched turned to gold or ashes. His wife, Elena, was the single soft stroke in an otherwise stark and brutal painting. She was the envy of many, a serene, breathtaking woman who had tamed the untamable Vincent Drake. To outsiders, she embodied grace and prosperity, wrapped in couture gowns and adorned with diamonds, the perfect complement to a man of his magnitude. They had met at a charity gala, a whirlwind courtship that ended in a wedding so extravagant it was hailed as the social event of the decade. Elena, once an art curator with a gentle heart and a passion for timeless beauty, had been swept away by his magnetism, his power, the sheer force of his will. She thought she glimpsed a softness under the steel, a man who craved the warmth she gave so freely. Their life was a carefully staged portrait of wealth. Their penthouse, a tower of glass and steel atop one of his own skyscrapers, offered a godlike view of the city below. It was a place of minimalist perfection, clean lines, monochrome palettes, and museum-worthy art. Yet for all its stunning beauty, it was a home that seemed to hold its breath. Silence lingered, broken only by the faint hum of the city far below, or the soft, almost hesitant chime of an antique grandfather clock echoing through the vast hallway. It was a beautiful prison, and though Elena loved Vincent deeply, she was beginning to feel the pressure of its gilded bars. Vincent's love was possessive, suffocating in its perfection. He adored her, of that she had no doubt, but he adored her the same way he cherished his fleet of rare sports cars or his priceless Jeff Koons sculpture. She was a flawless possession to display, to protect from the ugliness of the world, to keep unsullied and admired. He arranged her calendar, selected her friends, even curated her wardrobe. His approval was the currency with which she unknowingly traded away pieces of herself. She had walked away from her museum career, let go of her small circle of artistic friends, traded her quiet days of books and galleries for him. For a while, his love had been enough, but a quiet, persistent longing had begun to bloom inside Elena. A craving for something real, something entirely her own. A child. An heir to the Drake Empire, yes, but far beyond that. A tiny warm presence to fill the echoing silence, to scatter their perfect order with the messy, beautiful reality of life. She pictured a little hand wrapped around hers, the sound of giggles ringing off the cold marble floors. A reason to exist beyond being Mrs. Vincent Drake. For weeks she had felt unwell, a constant tiredness, a heightened sensitivity to every scent and taste. At first she brushed it off as the usual lethargy that sometimes crept into her idle days. But then a wild, electrifying hope had taken root. With trembling fingers, she had taken a home pregnancy test. The 2 bright pink lines appeared like a miracle, an irreversible dawn. Pure joy flooded her, so fierce it stole her breath. This was it. This was the answer, the one thing that would transform their flawless house into a real home. Surely, this would thaw the last wall of ice around Vincent's heart. He would be a father. The fierce protectiveness he poured into his company, into her, would now shield their child. She pictured him, mighty Vincent Drake, brought to his knees by the tiny grasp of a son or daughter. She decided she would tell him that night. He was hosting a dinner party, a mandatory showcase for his most powerful partners and their immaculately polished wives. Elena, as always, played the perfect hostess. She drifted through the glittering crowd with an otherworldly grace, a secret smile tugging at her lips, her hand instinctively, tenderly resting on her still flat stomach. The gown Vincent had chosen for her, a column of silver silk that shimmered like moonlight on water, felt different tonight. It felt like a chrysalis, a beautiful shell for the astonishing transformation happening inside her. Later, after the final guest had gone, leaving behind the ghost of expensive perfume and a faint trail of cigar smoke, she found Vincent in his study. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, the city lights spread beneath him like a carpet of trapped stars. The power that radiated from him felt almost tangible. "Vincent," she began, her voice softer than she intended. He turned, his eyes storm-gray and unreadable, fixing on her. A faint smile touched his lips, that rare, possessive smile that never failed to make her heart flutter. "You were flawless tonight, my love, the perfect hostess. They couldn't take their eyes off you." "Thank you," she whispered, her heart pounding so hard it echoed in her ears. She stepped closer, her silver gown whispering across the plush carpet. She drew in a deep breath, her eyes shining with all the hope and love she carried inside. "I have something to tell you, something wonderful." He lifted an eyebrow, genuine curiosity flickering in his gaze. "Oh? We're going to have a baby." The words slipped out, soft and brimming with wonder. "I'm pregnant." She waited, for the burst of joy, for him to laugh and pull her into his arms, to share the enormous life-changing meaning of what she just said. But instead, the silence in the room thickened, pressing the air from her lungs. The faint smile on Vincent's face did not grow. It simply vanished. His eyes, which moments before held a trace of warmth, hardened to cold shards of steel. The hand holding the whiskey glass stayed utterly still. He looked at her, really looked, and in that instant the man she loved was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating CEO of Drake Industries. Then he spoke, his voice quiet, stripped of any trace of affection, a voice that could sign away companies or crush rivals with the same chilling calm. "No." Elena's smile faltered. "No, what? What do you mean?" "No," he repeated, taking a slow, deliberate sip of his whiskey. "You will not have a baby. You'll make an appointment. You'll get rid of it." The words struck her like a physical blow. Air whooshed from her lungs, the brilliant city skyline behind him dissolving into a meaningless blur. "Get rid of it?" she whispered, the words sour and poisonous on her tongue. "Vincent, this is our child, our baby." "It's a complication," he said, turning his back to her to face the city once more. He owned it, a distraction, nothing more. "Our life is perfect as it is. A child changes everything, and not for the better. The noise, the mess, the demands, it's an unacceptable disruption to our business, to our lives." "A disruption?" she echoed, her voice trembling with disbelief, her mind clawing at an understanding too awful to accept. "Vincent, it's a life. Our family. I thought you'd be happy." He turned back to her then, his face an unreadable mask of polished stone. "Happiness is a well-managed portfolio, Elena. It's a climbing stock price. It's acquiring a rival before he can acquire you. It is not dirty diapers and sleepless nights. Our marriage is an asset, a successful merger of my public image and your beauty. A child is a liability." Hot, bitter tears stung her eyes. "So that's all I am to you? An asset? A piece of your portfolio?" "You are my wife," he said evenly, as if that settled every argument. "And you will do as I say. I built this life for you, for us. I've given you everything you could possibly want. I will not have it ruined by sentimentality." He crossed the room to his desk, every step measured and precise. He picked up a pen and a sheet of his monogrammed stationery. With a few quick strokes, he scribbled a name and a number. It was a private clinic, renowned for discretion and wealthy clientele. He held it out to her. "Call them tomorrow. I'll have my assistant arrange everything. We'll leave for the Maldives for a week. By the time we return, this will be forgotten. A minor inconvenience, handled." Elena stared at the slip of paper. His elegant handwriting curved across it like a death sentence. It wasn't just a note, it was a grave marker for her child. Her dreams, the love she once believed was unbreakable. In that crushing instant, the beautiful gilded cage Vincent had built for her revealed itself for what it truly was, a prison, and she, its prized possession. The tears she had fought back now spilled freely, carving icy paths down her cheeks. She looked at the man she had married, the man she had once loved with every part of her soul, and saw a stranger, a monster wrapped in a custom suit. She did not take the paper. She did not say another word. She simply turned and walked out of the study, her silver gown, once a symbol of her beautiful life, now feeling like a funeral shroud. Somewhere down the cavernous hallway, the grandfather clock chimed once, a lonely, mournful sound echoing the breaking of her heart. Vincent Drake had made his demand, had drawn his line in the sand, and as Elena moved through the silent, echoing rooms of their perfect home, a terrifying, liberating thought took root. He had given her a choice, the baby or their life together. But never, not for a second, did he consider she might choose the baby and a life entirely her own. The king had made his decree, but he had forgotten one vital truth. Even the most exquisite songbird, when its cage turns into a tomb, will find the strength to fly. The night stretched on, long, dark, and sleepless, as Elena lay alone in their vast, cold bed. The space beside her remained empty. Vincent had never come to her. He stayed in his study, the titan in his tower, certain of her obedience, unbothered by doubt. The thought cut through her like a fresh blade. He didn't see her as a partner, a woman with her own heart and mind. To him, she was an extension of himself, a beautiful automaton designed for perfect compliance. But every flutter, every tiny kick of the life inside her was a silent yet thunderous defiance of his command. This was not a complication. This was a child, her child. A fierce, primal wave of protectiveness rose inside her, fierce enough to snuff out the last flickers of naive love for Vincent. The man she had adored was gone. Nothing but an illusion she had clung to desperately. The real Vincent Drake was the man who had stared at her with eyes as cold as a frozen sea and ordered the erasure of their child as if it were a failed investment. As dawn broke, painting the sky in bruised strokes of purple and gray, Elena made her decision. It was a choice born from terror and a strength she never knew she possessed. She could not stay. She would not sacrifice her child for a life that had revealed itself as a hollow, glittering lie. She would disappear. Her movements were quiet, almost invisible, like a thief in a place she once called home. She passed by her sprawling walk-in closet, a vault of designer clothes and jewelry Vincent had handpicked for her. None of it was truly hers. They were costumes for the role of Mrs. Drake. Instead, she found an old, dusty suitcase tucked away in a forgotten storage room, a leftover from the woman she used to be before him. Into it she packed only what felt honestly hers, a dog-eared copy of 100 Years of Solitude, a framed photograph of her parents, and a simple faded sundress she had always loved. She took no diamonds, no lavish accessories, only the small gold locket her grandmother had given her, which she wore hidden beneath her blouse. She paused, her hand hovering over her wedding and engagement rings, which sparkled obscenely on her vanity table. A sudden surge of disgust rose within her. She left them behind. They were chains, not symbols of love. The final and most crucial part of her escape demanded a cunning she hadn't known she possessed. She understood Vincent's world all too well. Surveillance, control, everything tracked. Her credit cards would be flagged, her known contacts monitored. She needed cash, and a way to vanish off the grid. She remembered a careless conversation she had overheard weeks ago, Vincent bragging to a business partner about his rainy day fund, a stash of physical, untraceable cash hidden in his home office. Behind a false panel in the mahogany bookcase, he had boasted, a hedge against unforeseen market crashes. The irony didn't escape her. He was about to face a very different kind of crash. Her heart pounded as she slipped into his inner sanctum, the room where her dreams had been so cruelly executed just hours before. The air still smelled faintly of his whiskey and the cold certainty of his power. Recalling his words, she ran her fingers along the rows of leather-bound first editions. Behind a copy of The Art of War, she felt a subtle give. The panel clicked open, revealing a small black digital safe. Her pulse froze, a code, of course. She tried the obvious: his birthday, their anniversary, even the stock ticker for Drake Industries. Nothing. Panic clawed at her chest. Then her eyes caught the only personal item in the room: a framed photograph of Vincent and his late father, the man who had built the Drake empire from nothing, whom Vincent idolized and endlessly sought to surpass. She remembered Vincent once mentioning the exact date his father founded the company, a date he revered almost like scripture. With trembling hands, she keyed in the 6 digits. The safe beeped, then clicked open. Inside lay stacks of cash, euros, dollars, Swiss francs, and several bearer bonds as untraceable as paper currency. She took only a fraction, enough to survive, enough to build a new life, but not so much it would seem like calculated theft. She was leaving behind unimaginable wealth. She wasn't a thief, she was a refugee. Just as she was about to shut the safe, something caught her eye: a slim, leather-bound journal tucked in the back. Vincent's private journal. A surge of guilt rose in her, but desperation quickly crushed it. She needed answers, any hint, any clue, any explanation. She slipped it into her bag alongside the cash. She scribbled a short, plain note. Vincent, I cannot do what you ask. I am choosing my child. Do not look for me, Elena. She left it on her pillow, a final, unflinching message in their vast, empty bed. With one last look at the life that had nearly cost her everything, she turned away. She didn't take the private elevator. She chose the service lift. Her small suitcase, a stark symbol of how little she truly needed. She stepped out into the bustling, indifferent streets, a ghost fleeing a palace. Her first stop was a shabby electronics store tucked down a side street. She paid cash for a cheap disposable phone and a new SIM card. Her old phone, Vincent's gift, and her digital leash, she dropped into a public trash bin. She was free of it now. Next, she went to Grand Central Station, the beating, chaotic heart of the city. She bought a one-way ticket west. Destination meaningless, only freedom mattered. As the train pulled out of the station, carrying her away from the glittering skyline and the tower that bore Vincent's name, Elena finally let herself breathe. The tears came then, not from sorrow, but from a raw, breathtaking freedom. She was alone, pregnant, running toward an uncertain future. But she was alive, and so was her child. In the days that followed, Elena became a ghost. She drifted from town to town, always paying in cash, never staying anywhere longer than a night or two. She chopped off her long dark hair, dyed it a dull brown, and dressed herself in plain, forgettable clothes from second-hand shops. The elegant, carefully polished Elena Drake was gone, erased. In her place stood a quiet, relentless woman determined to survive. During long, lonely nights in cheap motel rooms, she read Vincent's journal. What she found inside chilled her to the marrow. It wasn't a diary of feelings. It was a cold, meticulous record of his life. Pages filled with strategies, ruthless takeovers, corporate sabotage, and scattered among the boardroom wars were entries about her, Elena. Not written with love, but with an unsettling detachment. She was listed as his finest acquisition, a social trophy whose beauty and composure strengthened the Drake brand. He mapped out their future in clinical detail, a future devoid of children, which he described as needless drains on resources and emotional capital. He believed love was weakness, a crack enemies could exploit. The journal was the final cruel confirmation of what she had refused to see. He had never loved her. He had only possessed her. Her wandering eventually brought her to a quiet little town, tucked away in an Oregon valley, embraced by towering pines and a soft hush that felt like mercy. It was a world away from Vincent Drake's cold steel towers. She rented a tiny furnished apartment above a bookshop under a false name, spinning a tale of being a writer seeking quiet. The town, with its close-knit people and gentle rhythm, began to mend the broken parts of her. She picked up part-time work at the bookshop, shelving pages and smelling old paper and ink, a balm on her bruised soul. As her pregnancy progressed, she found an unexpected circle of support: the bookshop owner, the kind doctor at the local clinic, other soon-to-be mothers in her prenatal yoga class. They wrapped her in warmth and genuine care. For the first time in years, she felt visible, not as a curated ornament, but as a real, whole person. One crisp autumn night, sitting by her small window, she watched amber leaves drift to the ground. A sudden, firm kick startled her. She pressed her hands over her belly, and for the first time in a long time she smiled, a true, honest smile. She had survived. She was safe, and she was not alone. She had her child, a tiny, fierce warrior who had fought beside her from the beginning. Meanwhile, back in the city that had once been her golden cage, Vincent Drake was a man undone. Her disappearance wounded not his heart, but his pride, his dominion. He raged through the hollow penthouse. He unleashed the world's most expensive private investigators to scour every corner of the globe. But Alina had vanished without a single trace. Her credit cards remained untouched. Her friends truly knew nothing. Her digital trail had simply vanished. To Vincent, it was the ultimate infuriating betrayal, not of love, but of possession. A prized asset had been stolen, and he could not reclaim it. His once flawlessly ordered life now had a glaring, unsolvable gap. As weeks blurred into months, the silence in the penthouse changed. It was no longer the controlled, deliberate silence of his own design. It was hollow, mocking him daily. It was a constant reminder of the one thing he could not bend to his will, the one person who had dared to defy him. The king still sat on his throne, but for the first time, his castle felt empty. He was alone, utterly and completely alone. The birth of her son, Leo, was the moment Alina was truly reborn. In the sterile hush of a small-town hospital room, she cradled her tiny, perfect child, and every last trace of the fragile, fearful woman she had once been dissolved. In her place rose a fierce, unbreakable love, a purpose so consuming it reshaped her very being. Leo, with his wisps of dark hair and impossibly small fingers curled around hers, was her whole universe. He was why she ran, why she survived. And now he was why she would fight. The first few years were hard. Money was tight, and the fear of being found hummed beneath the surface of her new life like a low, constant drumbeat. But there was a richness she had never tasted in her gilded prison. There was Leo's first laugh, his first steps, his giggles echoing through their modest apartment. There was the quiet pride of earning her own money, however small, working at the bookstore. She was no longer defined by a man, but by her own grit and her unwavering love for her son. She devoured books on business, finance, and technology, subjects that once belonged solely to Vincent's world. Her mind, once pliant and sheltered, grew sharp. She discovered a hidden knack for strategy, seeing order where others saw only chaos. Margaret, the perceptive bookstore owner, noticed her gift. She gave Alina more responsibility, asked her advice on inventory, on marketing, on how to keep their little shop alive in an increasingly digital age. It was Margaret, without knowing it, who nudged Alina onto a new path. "You have a head for this, my dear," Margaret said one afternoon, studying the impressive jump in sales thanks to Elena's online marketing plan. "A real killer instinct. You remind me of a young woman I once knew. She built an empire, you know." The words lodged deep in Alina's heart. A killer instinct. Yes, she had one. It was the same instinct that had carried her out of Vincent's reach, that fueled her ferocious love for Leo. But what if she could aim it higher? What if she could build something of her own, something that would protect her son and give him a future far beyond mere survival? She threw herself into studying the corporate world with ravenous focus. And inevitably, her gaze drifted back to the empire she'd fled, Drake Industries, and to its greatest rival, a bold but floundering tech firm called Phoenix Innovations. Phoenix had brilliant ideas and world-class engineers, but lacked the ruthless leadership and razor-sharp vision needed to truly rival Vincent's dominion. It was a caged eagle, powerful but grounded. Using a pseudonym, Elena began posting in online investment forums. Her sharp, fearless analyses of Phoenix's stock and market potential drew eyes fast. People started to listen. She saw their blind spots, their wasted opportunities, their hidden strength. Where they saw a deadlock with Drake Industries, she saw a path to triumph. Her secret online persona, Nemesis, became a legend in certain investment circles. Her predictions were uncannily accurate, her strategic advice razor-sharp. It wasn't long before the board of Phoenix Enterprises, desperate for fresh leadership and a bold vision to keep their company from being devoured by the Drake giant, took notice. They tried in vain to unmask this mysterious nemesis, but Alina, ever vigilant, left no trace. Then Leo suffered a terrifying asthma attack that landed him in the hospital, his small chest fighting for each breath. The fear carved through her like a cold, serrated blade. The local clinic was compassionate, but lacked the specialists and cutting-edge equipment he might someday need. For the first time, Elena felt the brutal sting of her limited means. Her son deserved the absolute best, the kind of security that only real wealth and influence could buy. That night, she made her choice. No more hiding, no more running. It was time to claim what was hers. Through an encrypted chain of emails, she reached out directly to the chairman of Phoenix Enterprises. She laid out an audacious multi-year strategy, one that wouldn't just save Phoenix, but position it to outmaneuver and ultimately surpass Drake Industries. It was bold, brilliant, and utterly ruthless. The board was stunned, then intrigued. They agreed to a private meeting in a neutral city. Elena spent weeks preparing. She poured the last of her emergency savings into a simple yet commanding power suit. She had her hair professionally cut and styled, shedding the dull brown for a polished, rich dark auburn. She rehearsed her pitch, her tone, her posture, shaping herself into the woman she had to be. The woman who could stand in a room full of powerful men and seize their respect. The woman who could face Vincent Drake and not blink. When she stepped into the boardroom at the Four Seasons in Geneva, the men saw a stranger. She was no longer the soft, sheltered Elena. She was a vision of calm, unshakable power. She introduced herself not with her old name, but with a new one of her own choosing. Anna Sharma. She presented without notes, her voice even and resolute. Her arguments were irrefutable. She dismantled their current strategy and rebuilt it before their eyes. Her vision so clear, so electrifying, it left them silent. She fielded their questions with surgical precision and fearless insight. She spoke of emerging markets, disruptive tech, corporate warfare. She spoke Vincent Drake's language, but with a daring and originality he lacked. They were riveted. They were persuaded. By the end of the meeting, they offered her the CEO position. Elena, now Anna Sharma, accepted. Her salary was staggering, her power absolute. Her first move was to relocate Phoenix Enterprises' headquarters, placing it directly in Vincent Drake's backyard. She bought a beautiful, secure home in an elite, secluded neighborhood, complete with a sprawling green garden where Leo could run free. She secured the best tutors, the best doctors, the best of everything. She gave her son the world she had once only dreamed of for him, a life of safety and boundless possibility. And then she turned her attention back to her true target. For 5 years, Vincent Drake had continued his reign unchecked. His empire grew larger, his power untouchable. He had never remarried. No woman could match the flawless image of Elena that lingered like a phantom in his mind. The perfect, obedient wife, her disappearance had hardened into a knot of failure buried deep in his gut. The one asset that had slipped from his grasp. Over the years, he had almost succeeded in forgetting her, burying her ghost beneath towering profits and relentless conquests. Then the news broke. Phoenix Enterprises, his long-floundering rival, had installed a new CEO, a total unknown named Anna Sharma. The business world erupted in speculation. Who was she? Where had she come from? At first, Vincent scoffed. Desperation from a company gasping its last breath. But then Phoenix struck hard. They lured away 2 of his top executives. They launched a product so innovative and disruptive it rocked the market and directly threatened Drake Industries' crown jewel. They blindsided him in a critical acquisition, an easy win he'd considered a formality. Anna Sharma was no figurehead. She was a predator. She moved with a swiftness and cunning that Vincent had never faced before. She seemed to predict his every move, to read his strategy like an open book. It was unsettling. It was maddening. He needed to meet this woman. He needed to see the face of this audacious challenger. He arranged a private meeting, a cordial encounter between 2 titans at a discreet Michelin-starred restaurant. Vincent strode into the secluded dining room, cloaked in his trademark aura of absolute command. He was ready to intimidate her, to remind this upstart exactly who ruled this city. And then he saw her. She stood by the window, her back to him, gazing out over the glittering skyline. When she turned, her smile was cool, polite, perfectly controlled. "Mr. Drake," she said, her tone smooth as glass. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." The world seemed to tilt. Color drained from his face. It was her. It was Elena. But it wasn't. The soft, docile woman he had once owned was gone. In her place stood a stranger, a woman with his wife's face but eyes like cut diamonds, cold, sharp, and utterly fearless. They held no love, no fear, only the calculating regard of an equal, an adversary. "Elena," The name slipped out, a ghost dragged from his throat. Her smile did not flicker. "I'm afraid you're mistaken," she replied, her voice calm and unyielding steel. "My name is Anna Sharma. It's a pleasure to finally meet you." He stared at her, mind reeling, pieces snapping together in a brutal, irrevocable truth. The uncanny insight into his methods, the bold, surgical strikes on his empire, the 5 years of silence. It had all been her. The woman he'd tried to break, discarded like something replaceable, had vanished and returned as the iron-fisted ruler of his greatest rival. A queen forged in the crucible of his own arrogance, ready to watch his kingdom burn. Dinner became a silent duel of wits, and Anna was its undisputed master. For Vincent, it was like supping with a ghost, a beautiful, merciless ghost who wore his wife's face and wielded the power to topple him. His weapons, his charm, his intimidation, crumbled, useless against her icy poise. Every question, every attempt to pierce her armor was met with the same unshakable calm. "You wear my wife's face," he said at last, voice taut, abandoning all pretense. The pleasantries were thin armor. Anna lifted her wine glass, her eyes locking with his over the rim. "A fortunate coincidence for you then, Mr. Drake. It must be comforting to see a familiar face in a new rival. But rest assured, I am my own woman. My background is in finance, not curating paintings." The jab was subtle, but struck him with surgical accuracy. He pressed, looking for a fracture in her composure. "Where did you study? Who did you work for before Phoenix?" "My resume is public record. Should you care to check?" she answered evenly, well aware he'd find a flawless but entirely fabricated history. She had spent a small fortune and burned every old favor to build Anna Sharma, a brilliant, notoriously private financial prodigy who had amassed her wealth in European private equity circles. A ghost story, but believable. She leaned back smoothly. "I find dwelling on the past rather unproductive. I'm far more interested in the future, specifically the share of the market currently held by Drake Industries." Vincent felt a spark of his old fury. "You're playing a dangerous game. Phoenix Enterprises is a minnow swimming with sharks." "My sharks," he nearly snarled. Anna's smile was razor-thin. "Perhaps the minnow has grown teeth, Mr. Drake. Perhaps it's evolved." She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial hush. "For example, your upcoming bid for the government's 5G infrastructure contract, a pillar of your next 5-year plan. It would be quite a shame if a competing bid, more innovative, more cost-effective, more ethically sourced, were to appear, wouldn't it?" Vincent's blood turned to ice. The details of that bid were among the most tightly guarded secrets in his entire empire. The idea that she knew them, that she could threaten him with them, made nausea twist in his gut. The possibility of a mole, a traitor embedded deep within his fortress, scraped at his sanity. He left the meeting rattled in a way he hadn't been since his earliest days clawing for power. He had walked in ready to size up a threat. He'd walked out feeling like prey under a microscope. Back at his office, he did what he knew best. He declared war. He unleashed a ruthless counteroffensive. He slashed prices to undercut Phoenix's margins, fed the financial press smear stories painting Anna Sharma as reckless and incompetent, and swooped in to snatch up their suppliers. He would break her, crush her, remind the world who was king. But Anna was always a move ahead. It was as if she had memorized his playbook, because, in a sense, she had. She had once lived under the same roof as its author. She knew his pride, his blind spots, his brute force tactics. For every strike, she had a sharper counter. He slashed prices? She launched a premium version of her product line, tapping a higher income demographic and opening a fresh revenue stream. He poisoned her name in the press? She charmed a respected journalist with an exclusive interview, painting herself as an unstoppable visionary, and him as a dinosaur throttling innovation. He undercut her suppliers? She had already secured exclusive, more advanced partnerships overseas. The war for market dominance raged on, and the business world devoured every headline. Anna Sharma became a phenomenon, fearless, brilliant, unstoppable. Phoenix's stock soared. For the first time in over a decade, cracks appeared in Drake Industries' invincible armor. Vincent became consumed. His security teams tore apart every shred of Anna Sharma's backstory, but hit only unbreakable walls. His investigators tried to retrace Elena's trail, but 5 years was a long time to bury a ghost. He was fighting a phantom, a genius who knew him better than anyone alive, and they were one and the same. The pressure began to crack him open. Vincent Drake, who once prided himself on his glacial control, became volatile. His temper snapped in board meetings, his decisions grew reactive, erratic. The vast silence of his penthouse no longer felt like a monument to his power. It felt like a cavernous, empty tomb. Some nights, he found himself staring at the bare spot on his dresser where Elena's wedding rings used to rest. He had ordered her to destroy their child, had dismissed it as a liability. Now, the empire he valued more than any living thing was being dismantled by the very woman he had thrown away. The irony was poison he could not swallow. Meanwhile, Anna's life was an exquisitely balanced symphony of warfare and warmth. By day, she was a general in Phoenix's war room, orchestrating moves that pushed her company higher and higher. By night, she left the battlefield at her front door and became simply Mom. She built Lego fortresses, read bedtime stories, and baked cookies with Leo. Leo was bright, loving, and completely oblivious to the corporate war raging around his future. He was her anchor, her reason, her unshakable center. Yet sometimes, when she lay awake listening to Leo's soft breathing through the baby monitor, a terrible fear crawled into her mind. What if the past she'd buried rose up and took him from her? What if the next blow from Vincent landed not on her company, but on her child's safety? In the dark, even Anna Sharma, Nemesis, felt the old ghost of Elena's terror gnawing at her ribs. One night, as she tucked him into bed, he looked at her with those serious dark eyes, eyes that mirrored his father's far more than she liked to admit. "Mom," he asked softly, "do I have a dad?" Anna's heart tightened painfully. The question she had long dreaded. She perched on the edge of his bed and took his small hand in hers. "Everyone has a father, sweetheart," she said gently. "Yours lives very far away. He couldn't be part of our life." "Is he a good man?" Leo asked, his voice small and uncertain. Anna paused, searching for the truth that wouldn't crush him. What could she say about the man who was both Leo's father and her relentless enemy? "He's a very powerful man, Leo," she said carefully. "But sometimes, powerful people make mistakes. They hurt the people they should protect. What matters most is that your mom loves you more than anything in this world, and I will always, always keep you safe." She pressed a kiss to his forehead, her love for him a wildfire of fierce protection. As she closed his door behind her, her resolve solidified like tempered steel. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about justice, about ensuring Vincent Drake could never again hurt her or their son. She would build a fortress so strong that even his shadow could never breach it. The war was about to escalate, and she knew that to truly win, to secure Leo's future and shatter Vincent's empire, she needed more than clever counters. She needed to deliver a single, crippling blow. She already had the weapon, his journal, the cold, meticulous ledger of his sins. For years, she'd kept it locked away, a painful relic of the man she once thought she loved. Now she saw it for what it truly was, a weapon, heavy with damning secrets, shady deals, and a ruthless philosophy skirting the edge of legality. It could destroy him, but using it would risk everything. It would expose her past, unveil her as Elena Drake to the entire world. And she didn't know how that storm might touch Leo. And in her deepest dread, she pictured Leo's face on magazine covers, strangers speculating about the child of a monster, and the wife who fled. That nightmare alone almost made her bury the journal forever. As she struggled with the choice, fate intervened in a way she could never have foreseen. An anonymous email arrived. It contained one encrypted file. When she cracked it open, she found a dossier so detailed it made her breath catch. A map of secret offshore accounts under Drake Industries' name. Accounts used for bribes, illicit payouts, and hidden profits. It was a smoking gun, proof of massive financial fraud. At the bottom of the email, a single line: "He destroyed my family too. Use this." A friend. Anna stared at the screen, pulse hammering in her throat. She wasn't the only life Vincent Drake had shattered. Somewhere out there was another ghost, another victim who wanted revenge as much as she did. A tremor of fear slid through her, a raw, maternal terror that this war had always been about profits and power, but now it could come for Leo's tiny, perfect life. She pressed her palm over her mouth, fighting down a sob she refused to give voice. She would not break. Not now. Her journal had always been her weapon, but this was a nuclear bomb. Vincent thought he was battling a cunning competitor. He had no idea he was at war with an army of his own making, ghosts crawling out of the graves he had dug for them, hungry for reckoning. And at the front of that army was a mother with nothing left to lose. The final act had begun. The fall of the king was now inevitable. The anonymous dossier had hit Anna's encrypted inbox like a thunderclap. It was dense. Pages of financial records, routing numbers, concealed accounts, a blueprint of Vincent's secret empire of fraud. The message attached was chillingly simple. He destroyed my family too. Use this. A friend. The words confirmed what she already knew in her bones. She was not alone in this hunt. Vincent Drake had built his throne on a graveyard of ruined families, and now the dead were clawing back. This wasn't just a weapon, it was a mandate. Her original plan for a clean surgical takedown felt too small now. It demanded more. The mother in her demanded more. Justice for every shattered family. Safety for Leo. Peace for herself, at last. This was bigger than her. Bigger than Leo. It was about justice. Justice delivered under the harsh glare of the public eye, so the world would watch the king crumble. While Anna sharpened her new blade, Vincent spiraled deeper inside his fortress of paranoia. The brutal war with Phoenix bled his profits dry and gnawed at his pride. His board whispered behind closed doors. His investors grew anxious. The myth of his untouchable power began to fracture. Desperate, Vincent ordered his investigators to abandon all subtlety. He wanted Anna Sharma's secrets, anything to use against her. They found one. They found Leo. When the file landed on his desk, complete with a candid photo of the boy, Vincent's universe froze. He stared at the image of the small child playing in a park, dark hair tousled by wind, face knotted in deep focus as he studied a ladybug on his tiny finger. It was like staring into the past. He saw his father's eyes, his own childhood face, reflected in miniature. The age, the timeline, the uncanny resemblance, truth slammed into him like a physical blow. This was not Anna Sharma's child. This was his son. The complication he had commanded erased from existence. A flood of feelings, shock, a flicker of something like regret, a ghost of the future he never allowed himself to want, rose and were immediately devoured by the emotion that ruled his life. Possession. The boy was a Drake. His blood. His legacy. An asset stolen from him. In Vincent's cold calculus, regret twisted into fury, and fury crystallized into strategy. He saw a way to win everything back. He would take the boy. He unleashed his legal wolves, a vicious pack drawn to blood. Within days, the courts received a brutal, high-profile lawsuit, a petition for paternity and full custody of Leo Drake. The legal documents painted Anna Sharma as an unstable, manipulative kidnapper who had stolen his child and was now using him as a pawn in a corporate vendetta. He would prove she was unfit, drag her through the mud, and reclaim what was his. When the papers were served, Anna did not feel fear or sorrow. She felt a cold, crystalline rage that left her almost tranquil. He had crossed the final line. He had turned their innocent child into a weapon. He had fired his last cannon, not at her company, but at her heart, at the one pure, untouchable part of her life. In that stillness, she vowed, he would never touch her son again. Not with hands, not with lawyers, not with threats. Over her ashes, over his corpse. The war was no longer about market share. It was survival. He had left her no choice. He would have to be erased. His power to hurt her, or Leo, wiped from the earth forever. The battlefield for the endgame was set, the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel, the stage for the annual Drake Industries shareholders meeting. This was Vincent's cathedral, his sacred altar, where he renewed his vows of power before his loyal disciples. He stood at the podium, draped in bespoke confidence, his voice echoing through the opulent ballroom as he spun promises of future growth and brushed off the market turbulence caused by his elusive rival. He was mid-sentence when the grand doors at the back of the ballroom burst open. Anna Sharma stepped through. A hush fell, a wave of collective shock crashing over the room. She was the serpent in their garden, the threat outside the gates, and she had just walked straight into the palace. She wasn't alone. At her side stood Leo, his small face solemn and curious as he took in the glittering room. Behind them walked Margaret, the kind, steady bookstore owner who had first sheltered Anna in her flight from ruin. Her presence was a quiet testament to the life Anna had rebuilt from ashes. Vincent froze, the color drained from his face. "Security," he barked, voice cracking. "Remove her, now." Anna didn't flinch. Her calm, measured tone carried clearly through the microphone she held and echoed off the gilded walls. "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Vincent." She began walking down the aisle toward the stage, slowly, deliberately, a queen crossing the final squares of a chessboard. "I have every right to be here. You see, I recently acquired the majority stake in the holding company that owns the largest institutional block of your stock. Enough, I believe, to call for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO." A collective gasp. Whispers erupted like wildfire. The press surged forward, cameras flashing. She stopped at the foot of the stage and locked eyes with him, steady, unblinking. "Most of you know me as Anna Sharma. That's the name I gave myself. But the name I was born with was Elena." She let the name settle over the room like a thunderclap. "Elena Drake." The room exploded, voices rising in disbelief. "I am his wife," she continued, voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. She turned slightly, gesturing to the entrance where Leo now stood clutching Margaret's hand tightly. "And that is his son, the son he ordered me to abort 5 years ago, because a child was an inconvenience to his perfectly curated life." She lifted a slim, leather-bound journal, his journal. "In my hand is Vincent's private record. His thoughts, his tactics, his disdain for the law, his belief that blackmail and intimidation are just business as usual. It makes for fascinating reading." Then she delivered the final blow. "But more importantly, I have irrefutable proof, now in the hands of my legal team and the authorities, of a vast, multi-year tax fraud and money laundering operation, hidden behind a web of offshore accounts." Her gaze pierced Vincent like a dagger. "Proof handed to me by another of your victims. Vincent, your past has finally come for you." Chaos erupted. Board members, pale and shaking, flipped through damning files as reporters shouted questions. Vincent stood frozen, stone-faced, watching his empire crack apart at the seams. In seconds, he was no longer a king, only a criminal, naked under the lights. Anna's voice rose once more, clear and final, the sound of a gavel slamming shut. "Your CEO is a liability. This company cannot afford him any longer. The board has a choice: remove him now, or Phoenix Enterprises will launch a hostile takeover when the markets open tomorrow. And I will personally ensure that every one of you who protects him shares his ruin." It was checkmate. Self-preservation, the creed Vincent had instilled in all of them, won out in a heartbeat. The vote was swift, cold, unanimous. Security, the same guards who had once obeyed his every word, escorted him gently but firmly off the stage. His vacant eyes found Anna's one last time. He saw no triumph there, no gloating, only the calm, implacable finality of a debt paid in full. The king had fallen, not slain by an enemy army, but dethroned by the queen he had forged in the fires of his own cruelty. In the end, it was never just revenge. It was reclamation. Anna Sharma, reborn from the ashes of Elena Drake, didn't merely take his empire. She built a better one. Under her command, Phoenix Enterprises rose to become a titan, celebrated not just for its innovation, but for its integrity. She proved power didn't have to feed on ruin. Vincent Drake faded into obscurity, a modern-day Lear howling at a storm of his own making. His name became a cautionary tale. Whispered in boardrooms and remembered in headlines, Anna never hid the truth from Leo about who his father was, but she taught him that a name alone means nothing. It's a man's choices that define him. She had fled with nothing but the child Vincent called a burden, and returned armed with the one thing he could never understand, a strength built not on fear, but on love. What did you think of Anna's ultimate checkmate? Was it true justice, or revenge as cold and precise as Vincent's own heart? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this saga of betrayal, survival, and triumph, don't forget to hit that like button, share this story with someone who loves a tale of epic payback, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more stories of dramatic revenge and hard-won justice. Your support keeps us going. Click subscribe now, and we'll see you in the next story. Andrew Smith. A new story begins. Andrew Smith was never the kind of man anyone would have guessed would abandon his wife, especially not on the very day she brought his child into the world. He was the charming one, the dependable one, the man every neighbor in Glendale trusted and admired. But beneath that polished surface was a secret that would destroy more than just one life. While Jessica labored alone in a stark hospital room, Andrew was elsewhere, exchanging vows with his mistress. In that moment, he convinced himself he was chasing real happiness. 3 years later, regret would gut him in ways he could never have imagined. Andrew Smith had grown up in a tight-knit family on the edge of Glendale, California. His parents, Richard and Monique Smith, were the kind of couple neighbors envied, bound together through illness, money troubles, and the chaos of raising 3 kids without ever cracking apart. Andrew, the middle child, wasn't the high-achieving eldest like Marcus, nor the gentle, artistic youngest. But everyone agreed. Andrew was the most driven. He dreamed big, owning a chain of thriving coffee shops and settling down surrounded by friends and family. He met Jessica Perez at Glendale Community College. Jessica was studying early childhood education, determined to shape young minds. She was warm to her core. She cared deeply for children and anyone who crossed her path. Andrew was hooked from the first moment. Within weeks, they were inseparable. Jessica's friends teased that she fell for his ambition and quick wit, while Andrew's siblings noticed how Jessica's calm presence grounded his restless energy. 2 years later, they married in a small ceremony at Jessica's grandparents' ranch in Santa Clarita. They were the picture of young, hopeful love, lifted by big dreams and bigger plans. Andrew opened his first cafe, Glendale Grounds, a modest space brimming with potential. Jessica found a job at a local preschool, spending her days teaching kids and her nights helping Andrew build his dream. For a while, it worked. They were blissful, blind to the hairline cracks forming beneath their perfect life. Andrew's drive pushed him to expand fast. 1 cafe became 2, then 3. He traveled constantly, chasing better beans, networking at coffee expos. Jessica's teaching hours were demanding, but she still carved out time for date nights and whispered reassurances. But as each shop opened, Andrew drifted further. He missed dinners, forgot anniversaries. Jessica felt the loneliness settle into her bones, but never suspected it was anything more than stress and success pulling him away. Neither of them knew that one ordinary afternoon in his flagship cafe would become the thread that unraveled it all. Cynthia Mills was a freelance marketing consultant, a force of nature wrapped in a flawless suit. She had only recently moved to Glendale, lured by the city's booming business pulse. Cynthia had a reputation: polished pitches, ruthless strategies, a magnetic charm. If Cynthia wanted something, she found a way. The day Andrew met Cynthia was unremarkable. At first, Cynthia walked into Glendale Grounds' flagship cafe, laptop under her arm, ordered a double espresso, and settled into a corner booth to work on a pitch for another client. Andrew happened to be at the cafe that day, sorting through invoices, watching his baristas hustle, chatting easily with regulars. Cynthia was exactly the type of customer he wanted more of. Savvy, polished, clearly someone who appreciated quality. What first caught his eye wasn't just her striking beauty, though it was impossible to ignore, but the sharp, electric energy she radiated. Andrew believed someone like her could help elevate Glendale Grounds to the next level. He introduced himself, insisted on topping up her espresso for free, and struck up a casual conversation. Before he knew it, they were talking branding partnerships, fresh marketing angles, and how to expand into more neighborhoods. Cynthia's ideas were fresh, innovative in ways Andrew hadn't considered. Eager to keep the momentum, he scheduled a formal meeting with her the following week. One meeting turned into many. Cynthia began spending entire afternoons at the cafe, often tucked away in the back office brainstorming alongside Andrew. She absorbed every small detail about him: the way he spun a pen when deep in thought, the quiet smile he wore when describing his dream of building a local coffee empire, the magnetic charm he brought to every discussion. Slowly, her admiration turned personal. And for Andrew, restless, often alone in his growing venture, Cynthia's confidence and spark were intoxicating. Jessica knew about Cynthia, but only in passing. Andrew would drop her name now and then. Cynthia suggested a new menu design, or Cynthia thinks we should update the logo. Trusting and supportive, Jessica never suspected anything. In her mind, Cynthia was a blessing for the business, an expert helping Andrew chase his dreams. But with each late-night strategy session and out-of-town business trip, the line between professional and personal blurred dangerously. Andrew was teetering on an edge he didn't even know he was standing on, one misstep away from an affair that would destroy everything he and Jessica had built. Everything shifted during a trip to San Francisco. Andrew and Cynthia were invited to a major coffee and marketing convention, an opportunity too valuable to pass up. Jessica, then in the early stages of pregnancy, couldn't join him. Her teaching schedule was demanding, and she needed rest. Andrew, overjoyed by the news that he would soon be a father, hesitated about going, but Jessica encouraged him. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance," she said softly, one hand resting on her belly. "Do it for Glendale grounds. We'll be fine here." In San Francisco, long days of presentations and networking gave way to quiet nights unwinding in the hotel lounge. One evening, over wine, talk of sales and suppliers melted into confessions about life. Cynthia admitted she was tired of dating men with no drive, no vision. Andrew confessed to feeling lonely, overwhelmed by his growing responsibilities, worried about being a good father while keeping his dream alive. One glass turned to two. The tension simmered between them, electric and undeniable. When Andrew walked Cynthia to her hotel room, he lingered in the doorway, a heartbeat too long. That was all the signal she needed. A single lapse in judgment exploded into a night of passion neither could pretend hadn't happened. By morning, guilt hit Andrew like a freight train. Cynthia, always poised, reassured him they could keep it discreet. No one needed to know. But Andrew felt trapped, straddling two worlds. Devoted husband and father-to-be on one side, reckless entrepreneur tangled with a woman who made him feel alive in ways he hadn't in years. Back in Glendale, he swore to himself it was over. He would cut Cynthia off, bury the mistake, and focus on Jessica and the baby. But forbidden flames rarely die so neatly. Cynthia kept showing up, her laughter echoing through the back office, her eyes lingering too long on him. The bond they'd formed in secret refused to disappear. Meanwhile, Jessica's pregnancy demanded more of her energy and focus. Minor complications arose, nothing severe, but enough to leave her exhausted and worried. At her 20-week ultrasound, the doctor flagged a few small concerns. She was advised to keep stress to a minimum, rest often, and come in for frequent checkups. Jessica did her best to follow every instruction, even if it meant stepping back from her beloved preschool classroom. Her coworkers rallied around her, covering lessons and sending her home with warm hugs and wishes for a safe delivery. At first, Andrew played the part of the attentive husband perfectly. He drove her to doctor's appointments, reminded her to take her prenatal vitamins, and assured her he would carve out more time for her, despite his ever-growing responsibilities. But beneath that polished surface, Andrew's emotional loyalty had drifted dangerously off course. Cynthia's calls came daily, pitching new promotions, inviting him to after-hours networking mixers that somehow always stretched late into the night. On the outside, Andrew still looked like the dedicated husband and thriving business owner. Inside, he was coming apart at the seams. One late evening, Jessica, half awake on the couch, noticed him texting furtively. She asked him gently if something was wrong, maybe a supplier problem or a staffing issue. Andrew brushed it off with a practiced smile, saying a vendor had suddenly changed terms and he was scrambling to sort it out. Jessica believed him. Why wouldn't she? He'd never given her a reason not to trust him. She clung to that image of the steadfast man she had fallen in love with. Still, she felt his distance. She saw it in the way his eyes drifted off mid-conversation, the way he startled when she called his name. She tried to bridge the gap, planning a quiet dinner at home, stringing fairy lights in their living room, cooking his favorite creamy mushroom pasta. Andrew appreciated the effort, but the warmth between them felt forced. Easy laughter had turned to heavy silence. Jessica told herself it was the stress of the baby and the cafe expansion. Maybe she was just being overly sensitive. Cynthia, meanwhile, was done playing the patient secret. At first, she assured Andrew she was fine being hidden, just the trusted consultant. But as her feelings deepened, so did her ambition. She began leaving voicemail after voicemail, hinting at a future they could build together. She started showing up at Glendale grounds unannounced, claiming sudden marketing emergencies. Bit by bit, she embedded herself so deeply into Andrew's world that avoiding her was impossible. The weight of Andrew's double life pressed heavier on his shoulders with every passing day, even as Jessica's due date crept closer. The balance he thought he could juggle was a heartbeat from toppling over, ready to crush everything in its path. As Jessica entered her final trimester, her condition grew more delicate. Weekly checkups became the norm, and her doctor ordered extended bed rest. She moved less, relied on Andrew more. He tried to be present, to bring her tea, rub her back, reassure her with gentle words, and for fleeting moments she found comfort in his care. But beneath it, she could sense it. His mind was far away. Amid this quiet domestic tension, Glendale Grounds was preparing to open its 4th cafe, a huge milestone for Andrew's growing brand. Local press, including the Glendale Register, planned to feature the grand opening, boosting the cafe's status in the community. Jessica, determined to support him despite her condition, encouraged him to throw a soft launch party for friends, family, and staff. Confined mostly to bed, she coordinated with Andrew's sister Abigail to decorate the new shop. She even hand-wrote invitations for every employee, praising their dedication. She wanted everyone to feel part of the family's success. Cynthia, naturally, was involved in every inch of the marketing blitz. The day of the soft launch, Jessica finally met her face-to-face. Cynthia was all graceful confidence, every bit the polished consultant. Jessica thanked her warmly for all she'd done to help Andrew's dream flourish. Cynthia returned the politeness with a tight smile, masking a storm of jealousy burning underneath. Andrew, caught between the two women, felt like he was suffocating in plain sight. Making matters worse, his parents, Richard and Monique, stopped by the new cafe to show their support. Richard pulled him aside near the kitchen, concern written plainly on his lined face. "You all right, son?" Richard asked, genuine worry clouding his usually steady eyes. Andrew forced a smile, assuring him everything was fine. Monique hovered near Jessica, fussing over her swollen ankles and asking what she could do to help in these final weeks. Watching them, his parents, who had weathered every storm side by side, made shame coil in Andrew's chest. He'd grown up idolizing their unwavering devotion. And here he was, their son, betraying that legacy with every hidden text, every stolen moment in Cynthia's arms. The soft launch of the new cafe, while publicly a triumph, only deepened Andrew's private torment. After the last guests left, Cynthia cornered him near the back office, pressing him to talk about their future. Jessica, though pale and clearly exhausted, still glowed with quiet pride in her husband's success. Andrew had once convinced himself he could juggle it all. A double life, a perfect family, a thrilling affair. Now the walls were closing in. Jessica was due any day. He felt trapped in a riptide of lies that would soon drag him under. Then it happened. Jessica went into labor 3 weeks early. She was curled up on the couch reading an article on newborn care when a sharp, tearing pain made her gasp out loud. Heart-hammering, she called Andrew, who was at the new cafe, locked in yet another meeting with Cynthia. He answered, but his voice was distracted. He told her he'd come right away, but Cynthia, listening beside him, arched an eyebrow as she pieced together what was happening. Jessica's contractions came faster and more violently. Panicked, she called Abigail, who arrived within minutes, and rushed her to Glendale Memorial. Dr. Wet Clara Alvarez examined Jessica and confirmed the baby was on the way, but her blood pressure was worryingly high. Tears streamed down Jessica's face, partly from the pain but more from the growing terror that Andrew wasn't there yet. Abigail squeezed her hand, whispering over and over that Andrew would walk through the door any second now. Across town, Andrew felt Cynthia's stare burn into him. She watched him hang up the phone, her expression unreadable at first, then softening into something almost triumphant. She moved closer, her voice a velvet trap, telling him maybe this was fate, maybe Jessica's baby had never really kept him tethered. She painted him a picture of freedom, of passion, of a clean break from the life that suffocated him. Andrew, bone-deep tired from months of duplicity, didn't fight it. In a daze, he listened to every poisonous word. Then he did the unthinkable. Instead of driving to the hospital where his wife was laboring alone, Andrew let Cynthia guide him into her car. She took him to a courthouse in Venice, claiming they needed to make their relationship real. A fresh start, no more secrets. It was reckless, it was shameful. But in that moment, drunk on fantasy and desperate to escape the crushing weight of his guilt, Andrew signed the papers. They exchanged quiet vows in a sterile civil ceremony while across town, Jessica fought to bring their child into the world. Back at the hospital, Jessica was wheeled into the delivery room. Her blood pressure kept climbing. The baby's heart rate spiked, setting off alarms that made nurses rush in and out. Monique and Richard arrived breathless, both clutching their phones and trying Andrew again and again. Calls that rang and rang unanswered. Jessica, delirious with pain and fear, pleaded for her husband. She wanted his hand in hers. She wanted his voice promising her everything would be okay. Abigail stroked her hair, lying through her teeth that Andrew must be stuck in traffic or handling an urgent crisis. Behind the surgical curtains, Dr. Alvarez readied for a possible emergency C-section if Jessica's vitals worsened. Outside, thunder rolled through Glendale's dark skies, a storm breaking in sync with the chaos inside Jessica's heart. At 2:45 a.m., Jessica gave birth to a baby girl, Amelia Rose Smith. The medical team stabilized Jessica's blood pressure after tense hours of watching monitors and adjusting medication. Both mother and daughter were finally declared safe. But the quiet triumph of Amelia's first cry couldn't erase the raw, aching void beside Jessica's hospital bed. Andrew was nowhere to be found. While Jessica clutched her newborn, tears slid down her cheeks, soaking Amelia's tiny blanket. Abigail held her trembling hand, whispering the only lie she had left. Everything will be all right. Deep down, Jessica felt a dread she couldn't shake. Was Andrew hurt somewhere? Or had he truly chosen to abandon her when she needed him most? In reality, Andrew was holed up in a bland, forgettable hotel room with Cynthia. The weight of what he'd done pressed on him like an anvil, each heartbeat a brutal reminder of the vow he could never take back. Cynthia, meanwhile, saw only victory. To her, Andrew's impulsive compliance was proof of an unbreakable bond. She ignored the shame carved into every line of his face. Inside, though, Andrew was a storm of self-loathing and raw panic. He could taste the bitter edge of what he'd lost even before he faced it. His mind looping through images of Jessica alone, of a child he had not held, of a promise shattered beyond repair. Morning broke, and Andrew's phone came alive with missed calls and frantic voicemails. The words emergency, hospital, baby hit him like a fist to the gut. Pale and shaky, he told Cynthia he had to go see Jessica to make sure she and their child were okay. Cynthia clung to him, begging him to stay, warning that showing up now could jeopardize their freshly signed marriage license. But none of her arguments could drown out the reality ringing in his ears. His daughter had been born without him. For the first time since that reckless vow, fear scraped at his bones, fear that what he'd betrayed might never forgive him, might never let him in again. By the time Andrew finally walked into Glendale Memorial, the damage was done. Jessica was awake and painfully aware of his betrayal. Rumors had spread like wildfire. Nurses whispered about the father who had vanished at the worst possible moment. Abigail cornered him outside Jessica's room, her voice low and venomous. "Where were you?" "Jessica nearly died, Andrew." He stammered something about legal issues with the cafe, but Abigail's eyes made it clear. She didn't believe a word. Even Richard and Monique watched him from down the hall, their disappointment so heavy it was almost tangible. Andrew stepped into Jessica's room, moving like a ghost. She lay in bed, pale and fragile-looking, Amelia swaddled tight against her chest. Jessica looked up at him, her eyes glossy with exhaustion and pain. "Why?" she asked. Just one word, yet it hollowed him out completely. Andrew had no real answer, no lie strong enough to stand up to the truth. He stood frozen, staring at the tiny life cradled in her arms, his daughter, and felt regret settle like ice in his veins. In that moment, he realized the life he'd chosen with Cynthia would never be worth what he had lost. In that helpless silence, his mind screamed with useless wishes, to take back a single day, to step backward into the man he should have been. But wishes were worthless now. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and baby powder. Soft yellow lights spilled from a lamp on the side table, casting gentle shadows on the walls. Jessica lay silent, her heartbeat sinking with Amelia's tiny breaths. Her lips were dry, her cheeks still streaked with the tears she'd shed when she realized he wasn't coming. Nurses slipped in and out quietly, offering help she barely noticed. There was only one truth now, heavy as stone. Andrew hadn't come. He hadn't even called. And while Jessica wanted so desperately to believe there'd been a good reason, the cold, cruel certainty burrowed into her bones. He had chosen not to be there. 3 days later, Jessica was discharged. But she didn't go back to their house. Richard and Monique wouldn't hear of it. "You shouldn't be alone right now," Monique said softly, her warm hand resting on Jessica's shoulder. "Not with a newborn. Not after everything." Jessica just nodded. Her gratitude and heartbreak tangled together in the lump in her throat. Their home, once alive with Sunday brunch chatter and baby name debates, was now stiflingly quiet. She kept to herself, pouring every ounce of her bruised spirit into Amelia. Feedings, burpings, lullabies, endless diaper changes. Jessica clung to the routine because it kept her from crumbling. Every time Amelia's wide, innocent eyes found hers, Jessica whispered, "You are enough. We are enough." Almost a week later, Andrew finally appeared on his parents' doorstep. He looked hollowed out, his clothes rumpled, dark circles etched under his eyes. He held a cheap bouquet of tulips and an oversized teddy bear, some pathetic symbol of an apology that no words could fix. Monique opened the door and said nothing at all. Monique simply stepped aside, letting her son walk into the lion's den he had built with his own hands. Jessica was curled on the living room couch, nursing Amelia beneath a soft blanket when she saw him. Her whole body went rigid. Andrew stood frozen in the doorway, tulips drooping in one hand, an oversized teddy bear in the other. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice barely audible. Jessica didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on Amelia, her jaw clenched so tight it ached. "I know I should have been there. Everything just got out of control," he tried again. Her reply was a whisper, sharp, raw, and more lethal than shouting. "You were just not there, Andrew. You were with her. You married her." The silence that settled over them was heavier than grief. He swallowed hard. "I didn't plan it," he muttered. "It was a mistake. I didn't know what I was doing." Jessica's head snapped up. Her voice broke for the first time in days, rising like a knife slicing through the air. "You made vows, Andrew. Vows to me, to us. And then you made more vows while I was screaming alone in a hospital bed, bringing your daughter into this world." "Alone?" Andrew's lip quivered. "I didn't think." "No," she cut him off, her tone sharp as shattered glass. "You didn't think. You never did. Not about me. Not about her." She stood, cradling Amelia tightly to her chest, and brushed past him without another word. The bouquet slipped from Andrew's hand, landing on the hardwood floor with a dull, final thud, like a promise that had rotted before it ever bloomed. That night, Andrew sat parked in his car outside the house for hours, engine off, headlights dark. Inside, Monique and Richard sat at the kitchen table, 2 mugs of tea long gone cold between them. Richard finally spoke, voice brittle. "He's our son, but what he did, it's unforgivable." Monique sighed, exhaustion in her bones. "And yet that's our granddaughter in there. She deserves better than shame and silence." Days bled into weeks. Andrew began to show up more often, not as Jessica's husband, but as a fractured man clinging to fatherhood like driftwood in a storm. He'd cradle Amelia awkwardly, his hands trembling, as if she could feel every sin etched into his skin. Jessica never left the room, never let him be alone with her baby. Not out of possessiveness, out of a raw protective instinct that burned deeper than betrayal. Eventually, Andrew confessed bits and pieces. He told her about the courthouse, about the rushed vows, about Cynthia's manipulation. But he didn't admit the part where he had chosen it, where he had let himself be led so easily. He painted himself as confused, overwhelmed, trapped. Jessica saw right through him. "You weren't confused," she said, voice cold as steel. "You were selfish. You saw something shiny, something exciting, and you ran for it. You left me, bleeding and terrified, so you could chase your fantasy." Andrew's shoulders sagged. "You're right, but I want to fix it." "You can't fix this, Andrew," she cut him off, ice in every syllable. "You can't undo what you did." Then Cynthia struck back. When Andrew hinted at leaving her, Cynthia threatened legal hell. She claimed she was pregnant, she demanded money, she reminded him in no uncertain terms he was her husband now, on paper and in court. There would be no neat ending. Jessica found herself trapped in a legal purgatory, technically still married to a man who now belonged, at least legally, to someone else. It was too much to bear. Maria urged her to lawyer up. Abigail offered to help file papers. Even Monique, once silent, cupped Jessica's cheek and said, "You deserve peace, no matter what it costs." And amid all the ruin, Amelia smiled for the first time. Big, wide, and unaware of the tangled mess she'd been born into. Jessica wept that day. Not from joy alone, but because she realized just how much hurt she'd kept locked inside. Her daughter was growing. Time was moving forward. And so would she. Jessica had a choice to make. She could stay tangled in Andrew's chaos forever, or she could build a life where she was no longer collateral damage, but the foundation of something entirely her own. A few months later, for Amelia's sake, she chose the latter. She moved out of her in-laws' house and into a modest apartment close to her old preschool. With Abigail's steady help, Jessica began stitching together a new version of normal. She returned to teaching part-time, her co-workers welcoming her back with open arms and quiet compassion during her hardest days. Everyone in Glendale knew the story by now. Andrew Smith had married his mistress while his wife was giving birth. It was the gossip whispered at church picnics, over coffee at local diners, ironically, even at Glendale grounds, and while parents pushed swings at the preschool playground. Meanwhile, Andrew's fairy tale with Cynthia was unraveling fast. Their marriage, born of secrecy and impulse, had no bedrock of trust or genuine love. Cynthia craved all of him, his time, his loyalty, his admiration. But Andrew's guilt dragged him back to Amelia over and over again. Each visit was both punishment and relief. He lived for Amelia's small hands tugging at his shirt, but each goodbye hollowed him further. He longed to be her father, truly fully, but he knew he would always be the man who had not been there when it counted most. He tried to show up for fatherhood, scheduling short visits, always under the watchful gaze of Jessica's protective family. Every time he held Amelia, he felt a sharp stab of loss, an echo of what he'd destroyed with his own hands. This wasn't the fresh start he'd imagined. It was a maze of regret and half-truths. As Jessica adapted to single motherhood, she found unexpected peace in therapy, arranged through her school's counseling program. Talking it out with someone who didn't flinch at her heartbreak, her rage, her confusion, it helped her breathe again. She confessed to herself that part of her still loved Andrew, or maybe just the man he'd once been. But forgiving him? That was a question with no easy answer. Some nights, when Amelia drifted off in her crib, Jessica lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how much of her old self she had sacrificed to someone who hadn't guarded her heart. She hated that a corner of her still missed him. One crisp afternoon, Jessica heard a knock at her apartment door. It was Marcus, Andrew's older brother, always blunt and impossibly practical. He didn't sugarcoat things. He told her outright that Cynthia had manipulated Andrew, but Andrew had been a grown man who willingly walked into that mess. Marcus offered to help. He wanted her to have a good lawyer to nail down child support and custody terms. Andrew couldn't just drift in and out of Amelia's life at his convenience. Jessica appreciated it more than she could say, even if it broke her heart that everything now had to be written down in legal filings and official court stamps. Through it all, Amelia remained her bright, steady miracle. The baby's giggles, her first tiny attempts to roll over, her fists grasping Jessica's fingers. These moments were pure, untouched by adult mistakes. Jessica clung to that innocence fiercely, vowing to protect Amelia from the storm her father had unleashed. As Amelia's first year unfolded, Andrew's private turmoil deepened. He tried to push for an annulment with Cynthia, but she dug in her claws. She demanded a steep payout to let him go. Realizing her victory wasn't enough if Andrew's heart stayed somewhere else, Cynthia turned possessive. She made sure he appeared at every gala, seminar, and social event she curated, her trophy to flaunt in Glendale's business circles. Andrew consulted Joseph Brandt, a no-nonsense divorce lawyer, who spelled it out bluntly. Dissolving the marriage would be a long, expensive fight if Cynthia contested it. Glendale grounds, successful but not bottomless, might not survive a drawn-out legal war. And every time he pictured bankruptcy papers or another headline with his daughter's name tangled in it, the panic clawed at his ribs. He wanted out, but the cost of freedom bled him from the inside out. And in the middle of that tug-of-war sat Jessica and Amelia. Andrew told himself he wanted to provide for them, to be present, to make up for his failings. But each week that passed, the walls closed in a little tighter. Meanwhile, Jessica grew stronger in her independence. She poured her heart into teaching, drawing fresh purpose from every lesson and every student's smile. Amelia was her anchor, her reason to wake up and try again. The more she rebuilt herself, the clearer it became. Andrew's choices were his own, not hers to carry anymore. She still felt pangs of sorrow, even a tattered thread of love for the boy she'd once married. But she knew now, a future with him meant dragging Cynthia's shadow with them forever. And Cynthia? She continued her campaign to mold Andrew into her showpiece. The successful entrepreneur at her side, the man she'd won. She paraded him through networking mixers and charity galas, insisting he pose for glossy photos while she beamed at the cameras. But behind that polite smile, Andrew's mind wandered to a small apartment, a baby's sleepy giggle, and a woman who no longer needed him to breathe. One evening, Andrew slipped away from a networking gala Cynthia had dragged him to. He found himself parked outside Jessica's small apartment, engine off, staring at the warm glow of lamplight spilling through her living room window. Inside, Jessica sat on the couch, gently rocking Amelia in her arms, humming a lullaby so soft it barely reached the street. Andrew felt it like a punch to the ribs, an ache so deep it almost stole his breath. He'd lost this. He'd lost the chance to be a father in the simple, ordinary moments that truly matter. The bedtime songs, the sleepy kisses, the way his daughter's tiny hand should have fit around his finger every night. For a fleeting moment, he imagined getting out of the car, knocking softly, begging to come inside, to tuck Amelia in, to kiss Jessica's forehead like he used to. But he knew better. That door wouldn't open for him tonight. He didn't get out of the car. He just sat there, tears threatening, tasting the full bitterness of choices he couldn't undo. He knew right then that legal battles and paychecks wouldn't fix this. He'd have to do something drastic to even try to make amends. But how far would he go to set it right? It started with a phone call Jessica never saw coming. She'd just come back from the grocery store, juggling a wiggling Amelia on her hip and a paper bag of vegetables balanced awkwardly on her other arm when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. Elena Collins, an unfamiliar name. She hesitated, then swiped to answer. "Miss Perez?" The voice was smooth, with a polished kindness that instantly made her suspicious. "This is Elena Collins with the Glendale Register. I'm working on a piece about Andrew Smith, founder of Glendale Grounds. We've received multiple anonymous tips that his personal choices may have impacted business operations. Would you be open to an interview?" Jessica froze. Her breath hitched. She'd always known whispers followed her at the playground and the preschool, but this was the press. This was exposure she hadn't signed up for. "I'm sorry," she said tightly, her tone polite but final. "I'm not interested. Please don't call me again." She ended the call before Elena could protest, then stood there in her kitchen, Amelia squirming in her arms. She pressed a kiss to her daughter's forehead and whispered, "It's okay, baby. We're okay." She forced the words out like a fragile spell, but a cruel voice inside her head whispered, "No, you're not. Not yet." But they weren't. The next day, the headline detonated across the internet like a bomb. Cafe King's Secret Vows, a tale of betrayal and big business. Her old Facebook profile picture was slapped beside Andrew's polished headshot and Cynthia's airbrushed grin. The article dripped with rumor and just enough truth to keep people reading. It laid out every lurid detail. The courthouse wedding while Jessica labored alone, Cynthia's involvement in Glendale Grounds, and, salt in the wound, the claim that Cynthia was now expecting Andrew's second child. Jessica sat at her kitchen table, the newspaper trembling between her fingers. Her coffee went cold beside her. Her chest felt hollow, as if her entire private life had been pinned to a bulletin board for the town to pick apart. A sudden wave of humiliation made her stomach twist. She wanted to scream, to hurl the newspaper into the trash, to vanish from Glendale altogether. But Amelia's soft gurgle from the playmat anchored her. She couldn't run. Not now. At the preschool, parents offered tight, pitying smiles, masks for curiosity. At the grocery store, strangers whispered as she turned down the cereal aisle. She kept her chin up, but inside she was unraveling. The privacy she'd fought to rebuild felt stolen overnight. Later that week, Maria, her bold, protective cousin, stormed into her apartment without knocking, newspaper in hand. "You have to respond," Maria barked, tossing the headline onto the counter like an accusation. You can't let her control this. You can't let them think this was your fault." Jessica stood by the window, staring at the fading daylight. Her voice was a broken whisper. "I don't care what they think. I care about Amelia." Maria's tone softened, but her resolve didn't. "And one day, Amelia is going to Google her parents. Do you want her to find this mess and think you stayed quiet because you were guilty of something?" Jessica blinked back tears, her throat tightening. "I was in labor, Maria. He was marrying someone else. What am I supposed to say to that?" What else was there left to say? Meanwhile, Andrew was unraveling. Glendale Grounds, once a beloved local gem, all warm lighting and artisanal pride, had become a cautionary tale wrapped in scandal. Loyal customers vanished. Business partners quietly pulled out of deals they'd once begged to be part of. His inbox overflowed. Cruel messages, disappointed laments, a few words of pity, but all of it suffocating. In private, Andrew's anger had nowhere to land except back on himself. He wasn't angry at Jessica, not even at the reporters. He hated himself for trusting Cynthia, for believing a woman obsessed with power would ever be content with love. Most nights, he lay awake on the edge of the bed he once thought meant freedom, listening to Cynthia's shallow breathing beside him, and wondered how he'd traded a home full of love for these silent walls. One night, sick of the constant tightrope, he cornered Cynthia in their kitchen. "Are you pregnant or not?" he barked. Cynthia sipped her wine lazily, her red lips curling into a venomous smile. "That's none of your business, darling, unless you plan to act like a husband for once. Don't play games, Cynthia." She leaned closer, her voice silk dipped in poison. "You made your bed, Andrew. You left your sweet little wife, you married me, and now the world knows who you really are." Poor Andrew, so humiliated that everyone sees the truth now. He stormed out. He needed control, any scrap of it. Driving aimlessly through the quiet streets, he wished for just one moment that he could rewind time. Back to Jessica's hospital room, back to Amelia's first cry, back to everything he threw away for nothing. Sitting in his car, he fired off a message to Jessica. "Can I come by? Just to talk. After Amelia's asleep. I need to explain." Jessica stared at the text for a long time before tapping out a short reply. 1 hour. Don't be late. That evening, her apartment hummed with quiet tension. Amelia was asleep in her crib, the baby monitor's soft static filling the silence between them. Andrew looked like a ghost of himself, eyes hollow, shoulders hunched, his coat still on. "I'm sorry," he started. Jessica crossed her arms. "You've said that before." "I know, but this time I don't expect anything back. I need you to know the truth." He told her everything. Cynthia's manipulations, the fake pregnancy rumor he still hadn't seen proof of, the lawsuit threats, the cafe bleeding money. "I'm trying to fight for an annulment, for custody, for a clean break. But Cynthia knows exactly where to twist the knife." Jessica studied him, her eyes cool and guarded. "And you? Are you fighting, Andrew? Or just surviving?" His voice broke. "I was just surviving, but not anymore. I swear it. Jessica, I don't want Cynthia. I don't want that life. I just want to be a father to Amelia, to help raise her, to give her something stable, and maybe one day, to be worthy of forgiving." Jessica's expression didn't soften, but her voice was steady. "You missed your daughter's birth, Andrew. You didn't just break a promise. You broke a moment, and you can't ever fix that." "I know." He wiped at his eyes with his coat sleeve. "I live with it every single day. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking for the chance to show Amelia I can be better than what I was." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "For her sake, you'd better be." When Andrew left that night, Jessica didn't feel healed. She didn't feel vindicated, but she felt something shift, small but real. It wasn't forgiveness, it was accountability. And for once, Andrew didn't run from it. The following weeks were a seesaw of new boundaries and raw hope. Jessica allowed Andrew to visit Amelia, but only on a strict schedule. He swore never to bring Cynthia near them. He came after work, sat on Jessica's floor, read Amelia picture books and made silly faces while she squealed with delight. Each giggle cracked his chest open with a painful, sweet ache. Some nights, driving home to the cold house he shared with Cynthia, he found himself pulling over, gripping the steering wheel, fighting the howl of regret in his throat. Cynthia, meanwhile, launched her own spectacle. She showed up at Glendale Grounds, uninvited and unhinged, picking loud fights in front of customers. Once she hurled a ceramic mug against the cafe wall, shards scattering while baristas froze in alarm. Andrew told her to leave. She threatened a lawsuit for emotional abuse. Word spread. The scandal poisoned what was left of the cafe's good name. Desperate to salvage something, Andrew toyed with selling Glendale grounds altogether, or at least signing over ownership to keep his name off the scandal pages. But something deep inside him rebelled. That cafe had once been his dream, and Jessica's dream too. Giving it up felt like admitting defeat. He wasn't ready to surrender it yet, not unless there was truly nothing left to save. Meanwhile, Jessica faced her own quiet dilemmas. After Andrew's betrayal, she had uncovered a new version of herself. More independent, more sure of what she deserved. It had been a painful birth of self-reliance, but also an empowering one. And yet, a question lingered stubbornly at the back of her mind. Did she want Andrew back in her life as anything more than Amelia's father? Could she trust him again? Could she even love him again? Everyone seemed to have an opinion. Friends and family offered cautious advice. Maria, fiery as ever, told her flat out not to risk her heart a second time. Abigail, caught between loyalty to her brother and her love for Jessica, only said gently, "Whatever you decide, I'm here. No judgment." In the end, Jessica knew no one could make this choice for her. One late evening, after Amelia had drifted to sleep, Jessica sat curled up on the couch, scrolling through old photos on her phone, her thumb pausing on snapshots from college days. Her and Andrew, beaming in front of Glendale Ground's very first tiny storefront, arms locked tight around each other. Tears pricked her eyes. It was staggering how fast life could twist, how a dream could rot into a nightmare. And yet, some stubborn ember of hope refused to die. She couldn't forget the Andrew she used to know. Kind, driven, generous with his love. If that man still existed somewhere deep inside him, buried under mistakes and shame, maybe, just maybe, he could find his way back. But only if he fought for it. And Andrew, finally, did. He took the step he'd dreaded for months. He served Cynthia with divorce papers. He handed them to her himself, right inside the Glendale Grounds office. Cynthia exploded. She hurled curses, knocked over a display of carefully arranged coffee bags, and threatened to ruin him. She promised lawsuits. She screamed that she'd take him for every cent. Andrew stood his ground. He knew it would be brutal. But for the first time in a long time, he felt strangely lighter. He'd made a choice, no matter how messy it would get. Cynthia's counterattack came quick and public. She arranged a tell-all interview with Elena Collins, the same Glendale Register reporter who had once called Jessica. In the lengthy exposé, Cynthia painted Andrew as a cold-hearted cheater who had promised her the world and tossed her aside. She claimed to be pregnant, again, with no medical records to prove it. She even tried to drag Jessica through the mud, implying Jessica had pushed Andrew away with her clinginess and unrealistic expectations. The gossip caught fire overnight. Social media lit up. Local forums buzzed. Boycotts of Glendale Grounds spread further. Andrew's phone filled with hate mail and accusations. Through it all, Jessica observed a change in him. He didn't hide anymore. He came to every court hearing, every mediation, no matter how hard Cynthia's threats hit. He publicly denied her pregnancy claim, daring her to show proof. And quietly but consistently, he showed up for Amelia. Not a single visit missed. Not a single excuse made. It was subtle, but undeniable. Andrew was at last facing the mess he'd created instead of running from it. One afternoon in court, Cynthia arrived flanked by a scowling lawyer but still empty-handed. No doctor's note, no ultrasound, no proof. The judge, clearly running out of patience, demanded evidence. Cynthia stalled, begging for more time. Andrew's lawyer pounced, calmly pointing out her crumbling credibility. Outside the courtroom, Andrew and Jessica stood together for a few rare minutes without the lawyers and cameras hovering. "Thank you," Andrew murmured, "for not tearing me apart in the press. For not making this uglier." Jessica sighed, a sadness softening the edge of her voice. "I didn't do it for you, Andrew. I did it for Amelia. She deserves to grow up respecting both her parents, if that's possible." Her eyes glistened with unspoken hurt, but also something else, compassion, or maybe just tired understanding. "You made the choices that brought us here," she said quietly, "but I won't let this end in bitterness. It's not fair to her." Long after she walked away, her words echoed in Andrew's mind. For the first time since his world had crashed down, he felt a fragile flicker of something like hope. Not that Jessica would magically forgive him tomorrow, but that maybe, just maybe, he could become a man worth forgiving. Jessica knew deep down she didn't want to take him back in the way they once were, but maybe, just maybe, they could move forward in a healthier way. Even as Cynthia's fury promised more chaos ahead, Andrew stood steady for once. He understood he might be too late to fix the wreckage he'd caused, but for Amelia's future, and perhaps for Jessica's peace, he wanted to keep trying. A few more months passed, bringing a mix of fragile relief and fresh challenges. The court ordered Cynthia to undergo a medical exam. The results were undeniable. She was not pregnant. Andrew's gut had been right all along. She'd fabricated the pregnancy to cling to whatever control she could wield. Exposed, Cynthia didn't slink away quietly. She doubled down, threatening to leak intimate photos and private messages from their affair, content she swore would ruin Andrew completely. His lawyer fired back with a firm cease and desist, warning her that distributing explicit material without consent could land her in even deeper legal trouble. The threats hung in the air like smoke, but for now, they were just words. Meanwhile, Jessica watched Andrew's evolution unfold right in front of her. He stepped back from daily cafe operations, handing over the reins to a trusted management team so he could focus on resolving his legal quagmire and rebuilding his relationship with Amelia. During visits, he was patient, playful, and fully present in a way he'd never been before. He even sat through a few of Jessica's therapy sessions, awkward but sincere, learning how to co-parent with her in a way that prioritized Amelia's well-being. Still, the bigger question lingered stubbornly in Jessica's heart. Could she ever trust him again? Not just as Amelia's father, but as a man she might love? In therapy, she confessed her fears openly. She recognized the undeniable changes in Andrew, but the betrayal had carved deep scars. She worried what forgiving him too easily might teach Amelia, that infidelity and abandonment could be excused if someone just said sorry enough times. And yet, she also believed in the power of genuine change. She didn't want to lock away her capacity to forgive. She just didn't know how far to stretch it. Andrew never pushed. He didn't beg or plead for a second chance. One weekend, he texted her simply, "Would you walk with me? Just you, me, and Amelia?" Jessica agreed. They met on a warm, breezy afternoon at Vugo Park. Andrew walked beside her stroller, making gentle small talk about Amelia's picky eating and her new obsession with a ragged stuffed bear she refused to let go of. Bit by bit, the conversation dipped deeper. By the shady benches, Andrew spoke honestly about the shame that ate him alive, the stupidity that blinded him when he thought Cynthia was the thrill he needed. He admitted the family life he'd once tossed away was exactly the life he'd wanted all along. And losing it had been his greatest punishment. Jessica didn't answer with platitudes. She let his words settle, while Amelia giggled at ducks waddling around a tiny pond. Andrew crouched down, letting Amelia wrap her tiny fingers around his thumb, the sun catching in her dark curls. For a fleeting heartbeat, Jessica let herself see it, the family they were supposed to be. She felt a pang of longing, but didn't voice it. Some wounds weren't meant to be bandaged with empty promises. 3 years had crawled by since that day she went into labor alone. 3 years since Andrew made the choice that split them apart. The drawn-out court battles had finally ended. A weary judge signed off on Andrew's divorce from Cynthia, citing fraud as the main reason for the annulment. Cynthia fled Glendale not long after, leaving behind gossip, unpaid debts, and not much else. Glendale grounds, bruised but not broken, found its second wind. A heartfelt marketing push and word of mouth about Andrew's quiet humility drew back customers who once swore they'd never set foot in the cafe again. He was no longer the cocky mogul who thought he could bend loyalty to his will. He was just a man, fallible and flawed, trying to do right. Amelia had blossomed into a spirited toddler, her wild curls framing a mischievous grin that melted every heart she met. She zipped through Jessica's small house like a whirlwind, her laughter filling each room with light. Andrew visited often now. He'd help with dinner, read bedtime stories, and linger on the couch to answer Amelia's endless why questions. He never stayed overnight. He knew Jessica still needed that boundary, but his steady presence made all the difference. Every time he walked through the door, Amelia squealed, "Daddy," and ran straight into his arms. Little by little, Andrew and Jessica had been inching towards something they hadn't dared to name at first: reconciliation. They'd started with a co-parenting course, neutral ground. When that felt safe, they took the bigger step: couples counseling. Dr. Samantha Lee, their patient and no-nonsense counselor, guided them through sessions filled with brutal honesty and quiet breakthroughs. Andrew owned up to everything: his betrayal, his cowardice, his selfishness, without excuses. Jessica told him, raw and clear, how deep the wounds ran. She drew hard lines about truthfulness and accountability. And Andrew, older now, more humbled, didn't flinch. Gradually, the walls between them cracked. On Amelia's 3rd birthday, they threw a small backyard party at Jessica's new rental, a modest but sunlit house with a patch of grass for Amelia to tumble on. Family came. Andrew's parents, Jessica's cousins, a few old college friends who'd stuck by them through the worst of it. Balloons bobbed on the fence posts. A homemade chocolate cake sat on the picnic table, half frosted by Jessica and half by a giggling Amelia. Jessica manned the grill, flipping burgers while Andrew chased Amelia through the yard. Her shrieks of laughter rose above the crackle of sizzling patties. In a quiet moment, Maria slipped an arm around Jessica's shoulders and murmured, "I haven't seen you smile like this in years, since before everything. You look happy." Jessica realized with a soft, steady warmth in her chest, she was happy. Maybe not in the perfect storybook way, but in the real, fragile, honest way that counts. Later, after the guests left and the yard was littered with bright wrapping paper, Andrew helped Jessica settle Amelia to sleep. They read her a new book about a family of lost bears who find their way back to each other. Amelia drifted off mid-sentence, her tiny fist wrapped around Andrew's finger. They stood there for a moment, side by side, watching her breathe. The moonlight spilled through the window, painting soft silver shadows on Amelia's rosy cheeks. Andrew turned to Jessica, eyes wet with a truth he had said 100 times but never more clearly than now. "I'm so sorry for all of it." Jessica didn't say, "I forgive you," not out loud. Forgiveness was still a road she walked daily, but she lifted her hand, cupped his cheek, and let him feel, in that gentle touch, that there was a path forward. Not erasing the past, but daring to build something better atop its ruins. 3 years had come and gone since that nightmare day he married someone else while Jessica labored alone. And still, regret clung to him. Every milestone, Amelia's first babbled word, her wobbly first steps, her tiny backpack on her first day at preschool, was both a joy and a dagger. He knew how close he'd come to losing it all. At night, he lay awake, haunted by visions of Jessica in that hospital bed, calling for him while he stood somewhere else, making empty vows that cost him everything. He couldn't change that. He'd carry that regret forever. But life, in its strange mercy, had given him a second chance, and he had learned, through painful trial, how to honor it. He poured himself into being the father Amelia deserved and the partner Jessica needed, flawed, scarred, but determined to never lie again. Slowly, they found their way back to something like love. It didn't look like the carefree college romance they once knew. It was quieter, built on lessons seared into bone. A deeper, steadier love, one that could weather storms because it knew exactly how hard forgiveness can be. Regret stayed with him. Some days it was a dull shadow. Some days it burned raw when Jessica's eyes glazed with old pain she thought she'd buried. But Andrew had learned. True redemption demands you never forget why you needed it. And so, he didn't. All right, my friend, so here we are at the very end of a long, raw, beautiful storm of a story. If you're still here reading these words right now, then some part of Anna's courage, Jessica's quiet strength, or even Andrew's brutal regret must have touched your heart in a way that lingers deeper than drama alone. So what does this story whisper to us about real life? It reminds us that no matter how flawless a cage looks, freedom is worth the fear it demands. It reminds us, like the Stoic Epictetus said, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Anna and Jessica chose this path. They stopped waiting for someone else to save them and became their own rescue. For you and me, it's a quiet challenge. Maybe you're not fighting a ruthless tycoon, but maybe you're fighting doubt, heartbreak, a past mistake you wish you could erase. This story is proof. Healing isn't clean. Redemption isn't instant. But with self-honesty, with discipline, with loving fiercely what's truly yours, you can build again. You can start over. As Marcus Aurelius wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. If this journey carved out a little room in your chest for hope, if you breathed deeper when Anna refused to bow, or when Jessica whispered, "We are enough" to her baby, then do one thing for us. Hit the like button, share this with someone who needs that same spark, and subscribe. Stay with us for more tales that remind you that pain can be a forge and that you too can rise from the ashes you once feared. We'll be here, waiting for you in the next story. See you there, my brave friend.